All right. Hi, everybody. Good morning. Happy Monday. I'm super excited to have Patrick from Outrageous Insights with me this morning. We're going to talk about a lot of different things, but Patrick, welcome. I just want to start with your company. Why did you start this company?
Absolutely. Well, it's a real pleasure to be here, Aparna. Thank you so much. Big admirer of all you're doing, and thanks for having me on. So we see at Outrageous Insight social research as a tool, not just for helping organizations to innovate, but also as a tool for tackling some of the most knotty problems of social justice that are currently facing the world. And I think, as we were chatting just in the green room before this, I don't know if we call it a green room when it's a live stream, but it's these issues are so linked. The struggle for race justice is the struggle for climate justice, is the struggle for LGBT rights, and we've got to see a sort of intersectional activist approach to it. And that's really what we're about. We're about using research as a tool for social justice. And what unites us as a group of 10 researchers is that we're all by heart and by practice activists. So we're the sort of crazy people that like to go and lock ourselves to bits of industrial machinery, Aparna, and try and use some of this, platform privilege and sort of, profits when they come to actually, advance issues of social justice. And that's really what we're about.
Oh, I love it. Yes, I think we can call it the green room, and we just age ourselves a little bit, like we show our age in that. Can I just ask you, like, you're a white guy.
Yep.
You've shared with me that, your family is pretty prolific in their professions, sort of traditional, right? Big consulting. Why are you doing intersectional activist research when you could be out making bank?
Yeah, I mean, I often ask myself the same question, but it's kind of what I feel drawn to. I mean, there are all sorts of things in my backstory, and 4 years of psychotherapy means I could probably run 500 podcasts just on my own story. But I think fundamentally what really motivates me is just a fear and an antipathy of bullies. That's number one. And an inspiration really from my Polish grandparents who were refugees from the Nazis. And my grandmother and my two uncles were basically on the run for 3 years in Nazi-occupied Poland and eventually escaped from Poland on the side of a ship, sealed up to their waist in water, in a water container. And their sort of story made me realize, and has always inspired me, it sort of inspired me about the strength of the human spirit, but also that we can all think that we're the most privileged, the most important, the most special, the most intelligent people in the world. And then next day you can end up being on the run for your life. And I've always tried to go where people are suffering in order to use some of the sort of platform and privilege that I've had as a white, privately educated, straight dude. I mean, I've won the genetic lottery to try and actually tackle some of these issues and help people live better lives. And I think, just to finish off, I guess it's partly about living up to my grandparents' memory, but probably partly also about trying to heal myself, Aparna, as well. So, what do they say in Islam? A person who heals themselves heals the world, or it's something like that. Or, a person who helps another person heals the world. And it's something that I think one can learn a lot from the way in which all faiths or no faiths kind of talk about our responsibilities to other people,
Yeah, I mean, that's a little bit also of like Eastern philosophy, and I think indigenous philosophy as well. All right. So one of the things I've heard you say about insight research, and I think just like research in general, is that like you can either use it for good or you can use it for evil. And sometimes we think we're using it for good, but it's not entirely good, right? It has some unintended consequences. And so, yeah, like help us think about like like what is good insight research look like? And
Yeah.
for a lot of us whose like personal theories of change are connected to making the world a better
Mm.
place, yeah, how do we become cognizant so we're not doing evil things?
Yeah. I mean, I think the first thing is that just realize that nobody has the monopoly on truth. Like, I think all of us think that the more skills and expertise and knowledge we have, the more likely we are to just be able to get to the truth. And that is just really not right. I mean, I find as I get older, I just have more questions than answers upon us. So that's number one. I mean, I used to be the cockiest son of a, you know, so and so. I won't say that word, but you know, it's kind of like I used to think, yeah, I'm the most smart, I'm the most this, the most that. But I realized a lot of that was just fear driven. You know, it was that sort of feeling that I needed to sort of prove how good I was. So I think, firstly, just acknowledge you could be wrong. Second is that I think now good research for social justice is only good in inverted commas if it is intersectional. You know, we have got to build diverse teams of researchers. We have to get diverse teams actually going out and doing research. And we need to also be training those people who are most directly living these problems and these issues and are experiencing these harms as researchers, so that we're not just sort of living up to this sort of colonial style. We're the great white researcher, the white savior, trucking out to basically go and like do research on people. Like, why aren't we actually going like, let's train people who are in refugee camps, let's train convicts, let's train people that have been in living in residential care, as we call it here in the UK, you know, people whose parents have died or sort of broken families. I know it'll be called different things in the US, but let's actually train the people with the lived experience and say to them, research doesn't have to be this ivory tower sort of guarded by a load of secular priests. It's actually a tool set that we should just throw open to as many people as possible, and then say it's not just having the tools, it's also having the skills and the confidence and the support and the backup team that will say, you know what? Yeah, you're trying to research this really complicated area, but you can do it. And that's why I feel that community-based research, where we're actually building communities of researchers, is the future, not just this sort of tech utopia that says, well, if you can afford a $5,000 an hour online research seminar, then basically you're going to be, or research tool, that you're essentially going to be able to do good research. It's not about the tool, it's about your willingness to be wrong and to build research that is truly inclusive and intersectional, you know.
Yeah, I think that what you're talking about in a way is like we need to democratize access to things that a lot of us have either learned in expensive university environments or those $5,000 seminars, or because we've gone to work at McKinsey and Deloitte. But anybody can do it.
Yeah.
That's like, I'm hearing you say that anybody can do it. And you also
but not everyone has the confidence, Aparna. That's the thing. And then you hear this sort of, in the same way, and I'm not sort of, I'm no expert on this, but in the same way that they talk about white fragility, there's this same thing with like democratizing access to insight research. People go, oh, we can't democratize it. It'll be dumbing it down. It will just be like lowest common denominator. And it's the same fear. It's like, just get over yourselves. You're not the only people who can do this. It's not that difficult. But if we basically like share generously and say to people, look, here's the skills. And here's also a bunch of people that are also what we call activist researchers that are going to have your back and are going to basically encourage you when your organization says you can't do it. And I mean, I'd love to hear your experience from a DE&I, background, because again, there's this whole sort of like status quo that just like freezes up and it's like, oh, well, we can't change. We can't possibly do it like this. And it's like, well, it's the same fear and the same BS that we're battling here, I don't know what you think.
Well, here's my experience with DE&I, and I might get into a little bit of a hot water situation saying it out loud. I think DEI has the opposite problem. Everybody thinks they can do it. everybody thinks they can do it, but they haven't actually spent the time building the skills to do it. So there's almost like an abundance of confidence and a lack of actual skills. And it bothers me. It bothers me. But, going back to your point about activist research, we had somebody on Data is Love a couple of months ago that said, like, who is an activist? Like, what is an activist? An activist is somebody that just has a conviction to work with integrity on a consistent basis. An activist is not somebody who's radical. An activist is not somebody who's like living in the far left field. An activist is somebody who just has the moral and ethical compass to work with integrity. And so I think in the when I think about researchers and activist researchers, and I'm like, these are the people that are truth tellers with skills. And so,
It's interesting you should say that, because I went a couple of weeks ago to a conference and met there an incredible person who's American, who I want to give a shout out to, called Leanne Fricker, I think her name is. I'll double check, and if I've got her surname wrong, I'm really apologetic. But she was incredible, and she was talking about inspiration as an act of resistance. And she was just absolutely fantastic. I really favorite talk of this entire conference. And she said that, and again, I'm sort of paraphrasing rather than quoting her directly, but she said something like, inspiration is too often like weaponized by despots. And it was so interesting to me, because I think on the left, we often think we're good and the right bad. We often think like we have the monopoly on, truth and morality and all these sorts of things. And yet actually what you see, and what I'm realizing, is that, coming back to an earlier question that you posed to me, Aparna, is that actually I've gone into and done projects with the best of intentions that then, because of research design, because of client lack of thought, because of a lack of intersectionality, have actually ended up having harmful side effects. And that is a painful thing to realize, when what you were trying to achieve through the project was actually to sort of improve and enhance rights for a particular group of people. But if we don't research in an intersectional way, then everyone loses. And I think it's been a massive wake-up call for me that actually, I've got to keep learning, and I've just got to be super, like, not hubristic like you say, but just actually like, how do we just go back and get that humility back that just says, I know nothing, and all I want to do is keep asking better questions every single day and working with other people and paying other people who can basically help me to learn to be better. And I think that's just an exciting way to live your life, because actually, like, ideas are really exciting. And I love your strapline that data is love. I mean, it's basically like, I want to get that on a t-shirt, and maybe I'll get my kids tattooed with that upon her. Is that weird, or is that cool? Too much.
I mean, don't have kids, don't have any lived experience in this domain. So, we met maybe a couple of months ago, and we've had lots of exchanges since then. And one of the things that you say a lot is getting people, like actual people, to do actual research. And that the future is, and you already talked about this, touched on it earlier, right? Like, we can teach anybody how to do this, but you say the future is getting more people who today know nothing about insight research, knowing how to do it and knowing how to do it for good. Why? And like, why do all of us need to learn how to do this? I mean, we're having to contend with so much all the time, every day.
I know. I think there are so many reasons why, but just think, if you're listening to this podcast, and live stream, about like issues that really matter to you. Like, maybe you're furious that basically there's been a shooting at your kid's school. Maybe you're furious that basically, African American women are dying in much higher numbers when they go in for maternity care. Maybe you're furious that like hydraulic fracking is happening in your backyard. Maybe you're furious that school prayer is not being taught, you know, and is not obligatory throughout the US. Maybe you're furious about the abortion, you know, sort of debate. There are so many things, but pick a topic that you care about and just feel that anger, and then think that research can be a way for you to get the evidence that you need to actually start to make some of those changes happen. And, you know, at the moment, what we say to people is, you need to go to an Ivy League college. You need to work with a big market research tech provider. You need to engage a load of sort of Deloitte, McKinsey, you know, sort of outrageous insight folks to come and do your research. What about if it cost you the same as basically your daily Starbucks to basically learn how to do research? What about if for that same price you were able to have a group of people who were all identified as activist researchers or activist research wannabes, who were like going, yeah, Aparna, this is brilliant. Yeah, you want to get basically open carry handguns banned in the state of Virginia? Yeah, we've got your back. You know, and I'm not saying that's the issue that you want to go for, but let's just assume for me, you know, it's like, maybe I want to get a crossing at the bottom of our street so that basically kids aren't getting knocked over by cars going too fast. Like, there are a million problems that need to be solved that are not just going to be solved by a small elite of people doing research. What we need to do is take these seeds, thousands of them, scatter them around the world, make sure those seeds are scattered in the places where people are experiencing the most harm, and then basically turbocharge those people with inspiration, can do, sort of, you know, some of our overconfidence in our own abilities, and basically say, like, you can do this and we're going to help you to change the world in whatever way matters to you. And like, I just think we want to have a much bigger impact, you know, and that's really why I think that community-based research and teaching people to be activist researchers is the future, Aparna. But what do you think?
Oh, well,
I could easily be wrong.
You know what? So I, for many years, have been saying to our clients and our customers that they need to build capacity to be able to ask good questions and make sense of that information. And they don't have to, it doesn't have to be scary, you know. You don't need pivot tables. You don't need some like fancy AI enabled conversational chat bot, you know, costs a lot of money tool to do it. Like, you can actually do really good research, pen, paper, and conversations. And I think of basic research skills almost like basic cooking skills. Yeah. It's not, I mean, great cooking, it doesn't have to be the domain of chefs at like Michelin starred restaurants. You can be a great cook. You can be a great cook. You know, you just have to master a couple of skills. You don't need like a fancy $2,000 sous vide machine. You can sous vide the shit out of things with like a Ziploc bag and a pot of boiling water, literally. Definitely. No machines are needed.
I'm sensing another fan of the A-team here, Aparna. You know, it's like, can we create a tank from this cactus and this old truck battery? You know, if I ever got in hot water in a sort of abandoned sort of shed, I'd want to be there with you, because I think you'd have the skills to like handle this.
Maybe. It's possible. Yeah, so I think of good research and just have like building our own capacity to do research as like it's integral to any innovation, you know, or like designing a strategy. Like, you should, if you're, you know, a foundation, for instance, your program officers should be able to like ask some really good questions of their grantees, rather than and maybe like none of us need to have the jobs that we have today, but like, wouldn't it be great if instead of hiring an external evaluator to do this work for you, and then you're removed from the lives of the people that you're investing in, that you could actually just bring it home a little bit closer. So I think it's a fundamental, I think it's a fundamental skill. And yeah, I want to shift gears a little bit. You know, in the green room, we were talking about sort of macroeconomics or our political ecosystem. Shit's going down everywhere in the world, right? Like,
True.
I don't know. I mean, are there like safe havens that we could all be immigrating to? I don't know that that's the case. And there are, you know, some really egregious things that are happening in the world, whether it's like Pakistan, like a third of the country being underwater, or what's happening in Iran, what's happening in Florida, lots of places. You said earlier about your grandparents that you can be so smart, so capable, so successful by every measure, and the next day you're on the run, standing in a feet of water, trying to escape. And so, yeah, when it comes to research, I'm just really curious about how you think of it, these factors that any one of us on an individual level can't control, but that have a pretty significant impact on our work.
Definitely. And I mean, I think that the problem at the moment is that if the research is being done by a narrow cadre of people who are not the ones that are basically experiencing these sort of, you know, horrific side effects of the climate crisis, and basically not experiencing the sort of, you know, what economists would say are externalities, but which we're actually saying are, you know, people from ethnic minorities, as we would say here in the UK, being disproportionately, you know, dying because they live in areas of worse air quality, for example, or, you know, people living on e-waste mountains because us in the West can't be bothered to basically recycle stuff. We just send it straight to landfill and then it ends up on the Indian subcontinent, for example. It's real people. You know, it's not an externality. It's a child that's basically getting cancer. You know, it's not an externality. It is basically a woman being killed by a patriarchal society. And we need to start actually just saying what it is. You know, this is the first sign of sort of, you know, dictatorship. And you've seen it in the US with Trump. You know, we're now seeing it here with somebody who has basically got the same first three letters and then a different final two letters, Truss, you know, which I only just realized now, and I should have maybe made that into a T-shirt. But we need to resist. And the thing is that a lot of people think that, for example, you know, because there was a big speech here in the UK yesterday, and basically the Prime Minister, Liz Truss, said, you know, what I won't allow is the anti-growth coalition of left-wing politicians, activist lawyers, trade unions, Extinction Rebellion, which is a campaign and an activist group I've been a part of, you know, stand in the way of us doing things like, and, you know, she talked about deporting people that had basically come across the English Channel to Rwanda in shackles, which is actually a thing that this government is actually doing. They fill flights with people that have escaped traumatic conflicts, and they put them in shackles on chartered flights that they then hide from sort of plain view. And then they have the sort of temerity, they have the chutzpah, if you will, to say this isn't deeply unethical and disgusting, with horrific historical parallels, and they think that that is ethical. And we have to say this isn't ethical, this isn't right. And actually, as soon as we start agreeing with this, you know, we're basically becoming, you know, and I've spoken about this before, we're becoming, you know, what Dr. King said, which is the greatest impediment to actually race justice is the well-meaning inaction of white people. If we don't speak out about this, we are totally complicit in this, Aparna. And I just think research is another tool for holding up a mirror and saying, this is unacceptable. This is not how we behave. And actually, this is not how we treat people, because this is just totally wrong. And people don't like to hear that, but that's just tough shit.
Yeah. You've done a lot of work in the, I'm going to just say in air quotes, like social impact sector.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is a sector that it, you know, hires a lot of evaluators, you, me, lots of people we know.
Yep.
We're being hired by foundations, impact investors, CSR arms to do research that isn't holding up a mirror. They don't want to know that the impact of their investments or their way of working might be causing harm. And now that we're a little bit older and maybe a little wiser, I'm not sure, but certainly more seasoned.
Stop holding up the mirror to me that much, Aparna. I know I'm 46, you know, it's like...
You said to me earlier, like, it's going to happen to everybody, you know, like aging fact. It's not an alternative truth.
Fair point.
How do you have this conversation with your clients? You know, when they bring you in and they want you to do good research, but in fact, they don't actually want that mirror held up. What does that conversation look like?
Well, by the time now, I'm not going to say that we've got everything right, because we absolutely haven't, but perhaps a more sort of instructive answer is just for me to just share an example where we actually turned work down because it wasn't going to actually sit with making that world better. So we got approached by basically a drinks brand that basically said they wanted to do work around sort of mental health. And that was an area where we've done lots of work in the past. You know, very sort of important issue, and it was going to be sort of qualitative research at scale, et cetera, et cetera. But what started to come out was that at this organization that was going to commission us, there were all sorts of sort of cultural issues and sort of various, you know, allegations and all sorts of like bad practice in terms of staff that were coming to the surface. And we just realized that we couldn't, in good conscience, take on a project that we would then not be sort of willing to talk about. And the thing is, I've deliberately answered it in that way because my decision not to take that project on was utterly selfish. Okay. So I'm not denying for a minute that I was like, my brand is basically my reputation and I'm not going to sully that. But also, you know, we've done work around male violence against women. We've done work around men or intimate partner violence where men have killed women. You know, we've actually done work around sexual violence. There's no way that we could basically have a consistency doing a project that basically contradicted something else. Let me give you one other example in 10 seconds. We got asked to do some work which was basically looking at agriculture, and it was going to be like an ethnographic project. And basically when we found out what the client was about, it was like selling this quite sort of harmful bit of like sort of, you know, something that was going to go on the ground that was basically going to just sort of make things worse. And again, it's like, we couldn't be on one hand giving part of our profits to fund the legal fees of arrested climate activists, and then on the other hand taking money from organizations that are about harmful business as usual. And both of those projects came at times when I and we couldn't afford to say no. But that is when you have to stick to your values more than ever, because otherwise, what have you got? And yeah, it was painful. My personal board of directors, i.e. my two kids and wife, thankfully Helen is much more successful than I am, Aparna. So, you know, that kind of makes things a bit easier. But my personal board of directors were like, what are you doing? Why are you saying no to this? And I was like, well, because like, we won't be able to talk about it and it's not the right thing to do. And I think we're all in a context where we've got to respond to social justice as well as to narrow personal interest as well.
Yeah, saying no to things is so hard. And a lot of the times the projects that you have to say no to are the ones that pay the best.
I know.
You know, you're like, oh,
well, let me give a shout out. Let me give a shout out to a guy called Theo Francis. Theo runs the Colour of Research Network. He is absolutely amazing. He's basically, he runs this company called Guinea Pig Fieldwork, and they are basically all about getting sample into research projects, getting people into research projects who are, you know, from traditional women in traditional Muslim households, you know, LGBT people in communities where you just can't be gay openly. Like, he does amazing work. He runs this Colour of Research non-profit as well that basically is trying to diversify things. And I brought him into a big client, because I knew that me going in alone was going to be 4% as good as the 150% if the two of us went in. And we went in and we did this project together for a big global client. And the difference that having Theo there alongside me made was incredible. And the thing is, like, it's not that difficult. You've just got to be prepared to say, you know what? It's not all about me just, you know, coasting on 400, 500, 1,000 years of white privilege. It's just like saying, let's just basically build the world that we want to now. And actually, you don't have to, it's not that difficult to do. You just have to be prepared to just bring people in, introduce people, get people to go, this person is awesome. I think they're awesome. You work with them, you give them money. And it's not that difficult.
Yeah, it's not that difficult. And we always have a choice. And one of my personal heroes is Heather Krause from We All Count. You know, it's like, where do researchers go to learn? Like, of course, we also have to continue to invest in you know, like our own professional development. And so she's where I go to learn. And one of the things that she says is like, you always have a choice. You think you don't have a choice, but you always have a choice in who you introduce, who you hire, what you prioritize, how much you're willing to push back on a conversation, you know, and how much you're willing to show up for the work, not around the work, but like deeply in it. And it also makes me think about, you know, something that as we've gotten older, a conversation that I have with like my closest friends is if you're doing something that you have to hide from your girlfriends, is it worth doing? Like if you're going on dates with like a real slimy character that like you would never introduce you to your best friends, don't go on that date with that slimy person. Just sit at home, watch some Netflix. It's going to be okay. Yeah. So this idea that like, if we can't talk about our work, if we're doing work that we have to hide, is it really worth doing? And I think that that's an incredible lens. So I want to wrap with asking you this. Let's say the folks that are listening in, they're like, I too want to be an intersectional activist, insight researcher. I want the insights.
Yeah.
What do they do next? They've never done any kind of research, although they probably have. They just don't think of it as research. Yeah,
it's just chats, folks. You know, it's thoughtful chats. Yeah. It's such a great question, Aparna, and I've valued this conversation and the conversations we've had before so much. So thank you so much for the opportunity. And I would just say, you know, firstly, we've got a load of free resources on our website. Like we are basically trying to like publish our sort of playbook on our website. So it's basically on this thing downstairs, outrageous insight downstairs. That's a weird way of describing it, isn't it? But you know what I mean? Like below, underneath, subtext. And yeah, there's a section up there called free resources. There's interview guides. There are probably 20 or 30 resources up there that you can just download and use straight away. So that's free. Anyone can get at that. That's number one. Second thing is that we've got a newsletter called Read the Room, and that is intentionally provocative. It's free, and it's not like some glorified sales funnel. It's basically just saying like, what are the tools and tactics that you can use to sort of navigate better through these issues of social justice? So you might want to subscribe to that. And the third is, if you feel like no one's listening, if you feel like no one cares, if you feel lonely, if you feel isolated, you know what? So do I. And actually, it's okay. And actually, the way we get through this is just by asking for help. Like the last couple of weeks, you know, we're just saying goodbye to our amazing colleague and collaborator, Daisy, and not at a time and place of their choosing. That's been hard. But actually, we've been in contact. I've had help from so many people. And yesterday we went live with the announcement, and Daisy has started speaking about their sort of new freelance business, and they're going to be amazing at it. And if you need somebody to podcast or live stream, please speak to Daisy, because they're amazing, and hopefully we can share the link somewhere. But I just feel like it's so easy to try and like just just try and grind it out and be like, oh, everything's amazing, I'm smashing it, I'm doing brilliantly. You know what? Last few months, I felt like, God, I'm doing a crap job. So just ask for help. Look after your mental health. And if you get stuck, please just call me, email me, put a LinkedIn message, just say, hold up a rubber duck, as an American colleague told me. Like, I'm really happy to just try and help you and connect you to anyone that I can. And I think the more we can help each other, the faster we can change the world. And we just have this phrase that it's time to light the fuse. And I think that for me is like the critical thing that matters in life. It's like, don't just talk about something, like light the blue touch paper, and let's just actually get on with changing the world faster, because we're not going to be around that long, and we just need to make shit better.
We just need to make shit better is the perfect place to end. Patrick, thank you. Thank you so much for being here with us today. And every time I talk with you, my brain is just like, boop, 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 like this, just like there's a lot happening in here right now. And I think the same is true for everybody else that's watching as well. So thank you. It's late in the evening, and I think maybe your personal board of directors are ready to have you join them for dinner. So have a good night and have a great week ahead, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much.